Well, I figured I'd get this done and over with now, as all I'm basically doing right now is shouting into the ether about this, that, and the other thing. And besides, given the fact that I really don't want to go make a whole lot of money on this, or raise a whole lot of money on this rather, and go out and stand up on tabletops in restaurants and talk to people and shit. I don't think I'm really gonna get much of a following. So, but anyways, I'll keep doing this. But I figured I'd take this opportunity to talk about something that I really don't want to talk about. Um, if you watched previous videos, you'll remember that I said there was something about myself that would probably deter people from wanting to vote for me. So why not talk about it now? You'll have to bear with me because it's not something that's easy to talk about. And to start, I gotta talk a little bit about my history. So, I went into the Navy in my late 20s. Um, I joined the military because I believe that the price of freedom is tolerance and vigilance, and yet its consequence is complacency. Um, Not that I really had an interest in being part of the military industrial complex, but you have to pick your battles in life. So I figured joining the Navy was something I can do where I would at least find myself in situations that would be, um, you know, like not like invading countries and not participating in all the bullshit that many of our service members get thrown into, like the fake or the illegitimate wars and whatnot. When I was in boot camp, I injured myself. At the time, it was a very minor injury. It was just something that gave me a little bit of discomfort. I was still able to do everything, exercise, do everything as normal. But about a couple years later, of all the stupid things, it was just sitting in a chair, bending over, and picking up a piece of paper that I felt a tear in my upper back. Went to medical. The entire upper right quadrant of my back was red and inflamed and swollen, and I was in a lot of pain. And ever since then, I've been in pain 24/7. Now, I don't know from experience what it feels like to have a knife stuck in you and never taken out, but if I had to guess, I'd say that's equivalent to the pain that I deal with. And it sucks. And after that, I couldn't exercise, couldn't play sports. A lot of things that were enjoyable or just, you don't even think about, it was hard for me to do. I would feel pain making a sandwich. I would feel pain having sex. So, yeah, things sucked. But I didn't want to give up. I still wanted to do my time in the Navy. So I went out to my boat until eventually I was pulled off the boat and sent to limited duty and eventually discharged. And it was really bad. I mean, I was on these painkillers that would just knock me for a loop. And I remember one time I was waiting to talk to the A-gangers about something, and I just zoned out, and I was there drooling on myself, and it wasn't until they called me a couple times that I kind of snapped back into everything. After I got out of the Navy, I spent a lot of money trying to figure out what was wrong because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me in the Navy, and that's why I got discharged. And I got told all kinds of things. I got told it was bursitis. I got told it was because of weight. And yeah, ultimately never was able to do anything about it. Went for a few scans, couldn't find anything on the scans, especially because of how dense the tissue is in the area. And on top of that, I was fighting with the VA over trying to get some disability compensation. Even though I was working at the time too, I just made sure I worked really slow and If I pushed myself too hard, things would spasm, flare up, and then I'd start having all kinds of problems. Um, but eventually I gave up trying to find a solution, and it was very hard to deal with. At the same time, I was working a less labor-intensive job, um, and that was going downhill. Not that I really liked it in the first place. Also, I was having nightmares. I never used to really dream much, but I would have nightmares about being back in the Navy and trying to perform my duties, and then being crippled by the injury again. And also, my marriage was going to south. I decided to take the opportunity to make changes in my life, to make changes for the better. I decided to go back to school. And when I started going back to school, I met this girl. And, well, met. Yeah. You'll understand later. And after a short period of time, I had developed this really obsession with this girl. I couldn't stop thinking about her one way or another. I really didn't understand why, because she she's the type of person that'd be like, yeah, you stay over there. She was really, it seemed like some kind of airheaded waif, really. And yeah, I couldn't figure it out. Also, what started happening was I started dreaming more, and it seemed like things from my dreams started happening around me, and that was very strange. And things just started getting worse for me from that point. And between the obsession and the things with the dreams going on, I couldn't figure out what was going on, and there was times when I felt, I was kind of taking a backseat in my own mind and watching myself do things, and I wound up doing a few things. Well, I'm gonna have to live with those. Not that they were like really bad things, but things that just were not me. So I couldn't figure out what was going on. It was just going on for months. Started drinking. I'd always would drink a nightcap every night to help squash the pain so I could sleep. I started drinking heavily to try and cope with whatever the hell was going on inside my head, the obsession, the whatever the things with the dreams were, and things just started seeming strange all around me. And then one day, I just happened to be going by a place where I used to live, and I realized I guess why there was this obsession about the girl. And buckle in because this is where things get really fucking weird. So when I was 19, I'm not a religious person, and like there's no religion that I follow, adhere to or whatnot. I'm very nihilistic, and what the fuck ever. Whatever happens, happens. There's no reason or rhyme to why everything happened to be the way it is. It just is. Things just happen to fall into place that way. But when I was 19, I decided, this is a thought experiment, I told myself, well, what if the universe isn't just random stuff that happens, and what if there's actually something behind the universe, like an order to things and so forth. And I said, oh, okay, well, if that's true, then I can make up a person and meet this person in the future. So I made up a person, a girl, gave this person a name, features, and time when I would meet them, so forth. And basically what I did was I pulled all these things from my personal life and used them to create this person. And not only create this person, but situations that would happen around when I meet the person, as like some kind of signifier to meeting this person. so that if I ever forgot anything, I could use associative recollection to piece it all back together. And the thing is that everything about this girl matched that description, and things that I was experiencing matched the description of things that were supposed to happen. And once I realized that, things just got worse for me. I started cracking at the seams, drinking got heavier, and I felt like I was trapped in this nightmare. Because every time something happened that was supposed to be off of a prediction, it just destabilized me a lot. And I got to the point where I started trying to kill myself, and I made many attempts. Eventually, I figured, well, this all can't be real. It's either in my head or whatever, but it can't be real. So I went to inpatient medical care and went through that whole rigmarole. Got on some medication, got out. Things weren't better. They were still just as bad. Was holding at the status quo for about 6 months, and then I went back to inpatient. This time not voluntary. And I started piecing everything together. I figured, well, I could explain the other stuff that happened, these predictions or whatever, as being either some kind of self-fulfilling prophecy or just an assessment on statistics, the most likely outcomes. But I figured at that point there's no way in hell I could just completely make a person with all these details, all these specific facts, and one day, 17 years later, just meet them. And they exist. And yeah. So things were really hard. It was hard for me to hold down a job because all the shit going on in my head, and I couldn't even look at simple schematic diagrams and make simple troubleshooting decisions or perform any simple troubleshooting. So it was pretty bad. I became very reclusive. Actually, went full hikikomori, which for those of you who don't know, that's when somebody just basically shuts himself out from everyone in society and everything. And in my case, it was especially painful because there were people that were trying to crowbar themselves into my life, not for my benefit really, but for their own, because they had something to gain out of it. So I also started having new nightmares, and the new nightmares were of the girl and the stuff that I went through, and they still haunt me to this day, along with nightmares about being back in the Navy. I've developed a lot of anxiety being around people. It got so bad that I was having panic attacks trying to go to class when everything was going on. And I couldn't focus, couldn't concentrate, couldn't do anything. So I've been spending the past few years trying to get myself to a point where I can be reasonably functional, so I can go back to work at my typical work and work at a full-time job. It hasn't been easy. Although what I did do was I developed a technique. Since every time I turned around, my mind wanted to go off down the rabbit hole into obsessive thoughts about everything that happened, I decided to utilize that in a way so that whenever I would start going down the rabbit hole, I would give myself something else to focus on. And that actually wound up being helpful because eventually I was able to get everything up here, well, not everything, but get the runaway thoughts under control, and I was able to start focusing. And about 5 months ago, I was able to start reading books again, which is something I like to do. I like to read in order to learn. Very self-motivated learner. I mean, I love learning about things. And I've been working on dealing with the anxieties about being around people. I've started doing more social things. But there's still a lot I have to deal with. I still have a lot of things that trigger thoughts and trigger anxiety, and I mean, shit. It's not even easy for me to do these videos. I mean, I know I can understand some anxiety for doing something like this, but in my case, I'm wound up pacing for like an hour or two before I make a video, and you can just imagine what it's like for me to do this. Especially since I had to do this video twice because the first time just didn't come out right. So this is even harder to do. I'm hoping that by next year, like I said, I'm hoping to get back to work. I'd like to be back to working a normal job by next year. Right now I rely on the VA for things because they deemed that it all stemmed from, you know, the mental condition, the psychosis, all stems from being in pain all the time. Which, you know, I guess, I mean, it does make sense in some ways, and it doesn't make sense in others. Yeah. So, I don't know if you've noticed when I'm doing these videos, but I have a couple of tattoos on my hand, so I figured I'll take the opportunity to tell you about those. I have 4 tattoos in all, and it's pretty interesting because the tattoos that are notes to myself I have on my hands where everybody can see them, but the tattoos that are just like, oh, well, anybody can see them, I don't give a shit. I got one on my chest, one on my back, so that's pretty funny. So, there's one tattoo on my left hand here, which you can see if I can get it. There you go. It says check reality. So I thought reality check was a little too cliched, and I wanted to be more of a command rather than a saying. Now, I don't think I don't have any reason to believe that I'm hallucinating anymore, especially since I haven't seen the girl in a while. Unless, of course, you know, this whole nightmare situation with what's going on in the world is a hallucination, which I don't know. Doesn't seem like it is. But I got the tattoo to remind myself to, if I do see something or experience something that seems strange, to think about it. But I also got this specifically because I want, you know, there's just part of how I am and something I learned from the whole experience. And the one thing I learned from the whole experience, I believe I said before, is that the one thing that people should be afraid of the most is the things that they believe in. Because the more you believe in something, the less likely you are to question it. And when I was in a grip of delusion and, you know, just going around doing whatever, you know, I was always convincing myself somehow that what I was doing was what I should be doing, and, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And like I said, there was a lot of times when I felt like I was a backseat driver or backseat passenger to my own mind. And that's one of the things that unsettles me about having nightmares, because it makes me relive that a little bit. And the other thing is that anytime, you know, it's also a note to myself to be aware of things like initial bias and confirmation bias and everything. There's two sides to every story, and just about everything in life is a double-edged sword. So unless you try to get all the information you can, you're not really doing yourself a service. And that goes for things that you agree with, things that you find favorable, as well as things you disagree with, and things you find unfavorable. Because if you're not trying to find out everything you can before making a decision, you're only screwing yourself. So, and this tattoo over here, this is a Japanese word, hitori. Hitori means alone. And the reason why I got this tattoo was because, you know, well, there would be days when I would just wake up in the morning and be like, oh, I'm going to see the girl, and she's going to be wearing this. And, yeah, and an always interesting thing happened. Before I would see her without even having any idea, knowing that she's there. I would always get the same feeling, and it was something I never experienced in life before. And it was a feeling like I was no longer alone in the world. So that's why I got this tattoo, to remind myself to be alone, to not let anybody get close, to keep people away, because I don't ever want to experience what I experienced back then. I don't want to experience any of it. I don't want to relive any of it. I mean, it's hard enough even explaining this, but you know, who gives a fuck? You know, nobody sees it. Big fucking deal. And if people see it, well, I mean, if I'm going to do this campaign, the whole reason why I'm doing this video is because you have the right to know. So, yeah, there was something I wanted to say, and I can't remember what the fuck it was now. But, you know, sometimes when I'm doing the videos, I may seem a little, you know, and, you know, now you know why. But the one thing about why I'm doing this campaign and wanting a more direct democracy, wanting the campaign to be more about direct democracy rather than myself, is not because of any kind of like shame or embarrassment or anything like that. I mean, you know, I'm human just like you. We all got our problems. Some of them are worse than others. Some people can handle problems better than others. That's just how it is. It's still the notion that, you know, if the campaign, you know, if this campaign ever becomes about me, then it ceases to become about a direct democracy. And you know, you can't really have a direct democracy if you're touting for a single person to be a leader. You know, it's time for people to hash out our differences and learn ways that we can live with each other again, rather than picking teams and dividing this country over which team wins and which team loses. You know, I'm human, you're human, we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. But we have to be able to face these mistakes and learn to change, and rather than be solidified behind our mistakes, be more tentative, because they're always getting new information. And yeah, so it can't be just about one person. And people are always going to disagree, and that's fine. People are always going to have differences of opinion. That's fine. But what kind of world are we making for tomorrow if we're just at each other's throats all the time? I mean, remember we used to say in this country, united we stand, divided we fall? And who really says that anymore? It's all about everybody that talks and gets on a platform talks about picking teams and screwing the other guy. But you know, there was a long time in this country when that wasn't what we were about. And you know, you have Donald Trump saying "Make America Great Again," but never once did he ever utter those words: "United we stand, divided we fall." Because isn't that what made America great? Was people coming together from all different walks of life and different opinions and so forth. So I figured I'd end this video off with a little food for thought. But now you know the skeleton's in my closet. So there you go.